everyone and welcome back to the channel. Recently I've been thinking a lot about what I would do if I was starting my flower farm from scratch all over again after 8 years of flower farming experience. I'm making a multi-part series on this topic, the first one being all about flower farm infrastructure, planning and bed prep, and this second part is going to be all about what plants I would grow. I got loads of great feedback from the first video, so don't forget to check it out if you haven't already, and I hope this video will be helpful for you too. Since starting my flower farm back in 2017, it feels like I've just about made every mistake in the book, from wasted time and money to planting the wrong things. However, I don't like to look upon anything I've experienced as a flower farmer as a mistake, but more like an opportunity to learn and grow. And while I'm sure there's still plenty of learning opportunities ahead, I've also got plenty behind me which have made me into the resilient farmer that I am today. Nowadays, I've got a heavy focus on soil health, plant resilience and building a farm system that's not just productive but sustainable and regenerative too. So in this video, I'll walk you through which plants I would choose for my flower farm and why. So whether you're just dreaming of flower farming or you've already got your hands deep in the soil, I hope this video gives you some insights to help you on your own journey. So let's get into it. In the previous video, I covered site selection and layout, infrastructure and how I would make beds. I also covered practices that I used to do that I no longer endorse. In this video, I want to talk all about plants, and like I mentioned in my previous video, everybody has different circumstances and the plants that work for me on my farm might not necessarily work for you on yours. There's a few things to consider when selecting plants as cut flowers, and these can depend on your sales outlets. Those are plant height. You want plants to produce stems that are tall enough for their eventual usage. Flowers used in retail bouquets need a relatively long stem length, whereas the stem length required for wedding work varies much more. Hardly any stem length is needed for bud vases and buttonholes, but much longer stems are needed for tall vase or milk churn arrangements. Vase life is another thing to consider which differs depending on your sales outlets. If producing flowers for retail, you want flowers to last as long as possible in the vase, whereas for wedding work, the flowers just need to look perfect on the day. For example, roses are amazing and beautiful scented flowers, but they just don't last long enough in the vase for a retail bouquet, which means they're better off being used in wedding work. When I started my flower farm, I remember planting quite a lot of David Austin roses, but as I pivoted more towards retail sales, I found the roses were left neglected in the corner of the field. Did you know that in many cases, flowers have been bred for longevity over scent, which is why many flowers don't smell so strongly anymore? But one thing I've noticed is that when someone receives a bouquet, the first thing they usually do is stick their nose in it. So I do try to grow some scented flowers to satisfy people's smell receptors. I'll get onto some specific plant choices later in the video. Another thing to consider is whether the plant you want to grow is suitable for your climate or growing conditions. I've found over the years that if something is difficult to grow or needs extra TLC, it ends up being neglected. Because as flower farmers we grow many different varieties, the complicated ones usually fall by the wayside. Picking flowers that do well in our own climate is the best bet. Plants have different life cycles and can either be annuals, biennials or perennials. Annuals complete their life cycle in one season, germinating, growing, flowering and setting seed all in 1 year. Annuals include plants like cosmos, zinnias, cornflowers, etc. Biennials take 2 years, putting on vegetative growth in the first year and going dormant over winter, and then flowering and setting seed in year 2. Biennials include plants like foxgloves, sweet rocket, honesty and sweet williams. Perennials can be short or long-lived and come back year after year. Many farmers like myself start off their flower farms by growing lots and lots of annuals, and it's a really cheap way to start your business. And as you grow and sell more flowers, you're able to put more investment into perennials over time. This way of building your business is doable, but the progress is slow. One piece of advice that always gets given to new farmers is to put perennials in as soon as possible, but this requires the initial investment. Growing perennials from seed is a cheap option and is possible but isn't always easy. Some perennial seeds go into dormancy, which requires lots of experience and special conditions to break. I've spent years trying and failing to grow some perennials from seed, and by the time I've given up and bought plants, I've realised I just could have planted them earlier and already been harvesting and earning money from them. So if I could, I would invest in established plants where possible. However, I have made a couple of videos recently on perennials that are easy to start from seed, so I definitely recommend sowing those yourself if you can. This includes things like achillea, feverfew and lupins, which are all must-haves on my farm. Find the links to those videos in the description or in the banner above. Annual plants require seeding, potting on and planting out at least once a year, sometimes more if you're planting successions. Then at the end of the season, the plants need clearing out ready for the next crop. But on the other hand, perennials get planted once and require very little maintenance except for weeding and mulching the bed and perhaps dividing the plants if you'd like to grow more of them. I've noticed a trend towards more established farmers growing a higher proportion of perennials on their farms, and you can see why they would. There's almost an unlimited list of annuals, biennials and perennials I could grow as cut flowers, so I've decided to narrow it down to my must-haves for each category for the purposes of this video. I'm also going to list a few varieties that I've grown in the past but I've decided not to anymore and my reasons why. A couple of years ago I decided to have an audit on what annuals I was growing and reduce the number of different varieties I grew so that I had more of what I needed and less of what I thought I needed but didn't use. I looked at photos that I'd taken of my favourite bouquets and noted which elements I really liked. I also looked at lists of what I'd grown that year and noted whether I found it useful or not. I have grown quite a wide range of annuals in the past, but for the purposes of this video I've narrowed it down to just 6. If someone backed me into a corner and told me to choose just 6 cut flowers, these are the ones that I would go for. And apart from the Ami, these are the ones I've chosen to grow this year at Hattie's farm. I'd love to know in the comments which ones you would choose, and don't forget to do this for perennials too. The first annual would be Cosmos, and the varieties I would choose would be Cupcakes, Purity, Apricotta and the Double Click Bonbon varieties. Next would be Helichrysum. I'd choose peachy and pastel shades which complement other flowers really nicely. They also double up as a good dried flower. Zinnias would be next on my list. I usually go with small to medium varieties like Cinderella, Lilliput and the Florette varieties which became available in the UK last season. I don't particularly like using the very large varieties like Benary's Giant for retail bouquets, but they would be great for wedding work. Scabious is a flower that I stopped growing a couple of years ago, but I came back to it when I found that the purple or blue varieties worked really well in mixed bouquets. I also love the pink for use in bright coloured arrangements. Ami is a really nice annual filler. It adds an airy texture to arrangements and can give some real height in things like wedding arrangements too. Snapdragons are my final choice. They're a really useful spike flower that comes in so many beautiful colours. I made a comprehensive video on growing snapdragons a while ago, which I'll link in the description if you need some tips on growing this must-have annual. I like to grow the Potomac and Madame Butterfly varieties. So those are my 6 must-grow annuals, and now here's a list of my must-grow perennials. Number 1 has to be dahlias, 100% no questions asked. If I had to choose only one perennial to grow, it would be this. And for retail, I would go with the pom-pom varieties, which tend to be more robust and longer lasting in the vase. My second choice is Achillea. It's a great filler that comes in lots of different colours and varieties, some more dainty than others. It's super easy to start from seed and is a great dried flower too. Next up is Sedum. It's an amazing long-lasting filler that is useful from May all the way to September. I use the variety Autumn Joy, which can be used green in spring, turning pink into autumn. It's super easy to propagate too. Check out my video on TikTok for propagation tips, and don't forget to give me a follow while you're there. Another must-have perennial filler is Limonium. It's an airy filler that adds something special to bouquets and comes in a few different colours such as white, purple and pink. I've grown this for quite a long time, but have only really started using it properly in the last couple of years. This goes to show that sometimes if you think you don't like something, it's worth coming back to it every now and again to see if your mind has changed. Feverfew is another great filler that adds a cottage garden feel to bouquets and is really easy to grow from seed. It comes in a double and a single variety and lasts a long time in the vase. I love using the daisy-like flowers in my market bouquets. For the 6th option, I was considering an autumn flower like chrysanthemums or asters, but I think I'm going to go with eucalyptus. It's great for Christmas work if you're into that, and it will save you a ton of money if you can avoid buying it in. Check out my interview with Neil Robertson, the eucalyptus farmer, from a couple of weeks ago if you want some tips on growing your own. I'm also going to chuck in a couple of extra perennials here because there's a few new things I've grown in the last year or so which haven't had enough time to become firm favourites, but I think they've got the potential. One is Trichum Little Carlo, which is a purple daisy-shaped flower that comes in autumn. It has the potential to be a really useful filler that goes with dahlias in autumn when the other fillers have faded. The other is Perennial Campanula. I love growing the annual Campanula, and I think the perennial one would be a great low maintenance addition to the farm. Since growing on my friend Hattie's farm this season, I've also been able to see the perennials that she's growing. One thing that caught my eye, which I used in my farmer's market bouquets last week, was the perennial Rudbeckia Gold Stem. It's a great pop of colour to put in bouquets, and I'd definitely be investing in this if I was starting again. One other thing to note is that having little bits and bobs, one or two plants of one thing or another, isn't particularly useful for me as someone who is growing for retail. But for wedding work, sometimes these one or two unusual plants are perfect for adding final touches to bouquets or buttonholes. Now onto some varieties that I've grown in the past that I've decided I no longer want to grow. Plants usually end up on my no-grow list for two reasons, the first being difficulty to pick. Plants that have low value but are time-consuming to pick don't seem worth it to grow. I'd rather grow a crop that is more profitable and requires less of my time to pick. A couple of examples would be cornflowers and the grass Brisa media. I always get in such a tangle when trying to pick these, so they often end up unpicked and staying out in the field. However, in some circumstances I will tolerate the difficulty to pick because I like the flower. Scabious is one of those that I find difficult to pick that I continue to grow anyway because I love it. The other reason to stop growing would be if a flower gets picked but consistently left out when I'm bouquet making. I often find I go to my favourite flowers first, and once bouquet making is over there will be a small pile of unused flowers. Any sunflower that has a vertical face will usually get left out, as well as flowers such as calendula. Before using calendula, I would look to use something more preferable like zinnias, helichrysum or cosmos. One flower that I loved that I stopped growing was Verbascum Southern Charm. I love the colour and the shape of it, but I found it doesn't ever seem to hold up well in the vase, often looking a little sad after 2 or 3 days. I'd love to know if there's any flowers you've grown but have decided to stop, and what are your reasons for doing so. Let me know in the comments. Before I round this up, I want to mention a couple of examples of scented flowers that I would put in on my farm for the smell factor in arrangements. Firstly, mint, which doubles up as a foliage for floral arrangements and always gets compliments when I use it. Second is sweet peas. I haven't grown these myself for a few years because of my focus on retail bouquets, but they're a must-have for wedding arrangements, if not a little treat for yourself. Stocks are also amazing scented flowers for spring, and I've loved using them to complement other spring flowers. There is a couple of things I've not mentioned in this video which are super important to consider, and these are the roles that different flowers play in bouquets and how to plant successions of annual flowers to ensure a consistent harvest all summer. I cover all of this and more in my online course, which is linked down in the description. Finally, when starting out and choosing perennials to grow, I would have a look at the varieties that others are using, what flowers you like the look of, and use books and garden centres for reference and inspiration. I would then start out small and buy half a dozen of a particular variety to ensure it's something I like and will continue to use before buying more or dividing it to create more plants for free. So there we have it. There are some things to consider when deciding what to plant on a new patch. It was pretty difficult to narrow it down to just a few varieties when in reality I would want to grow lots of different varieties for resilience and for variety. I hope this helped in some way, and if it did, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you're not subscribed, don't forget to do so you don't miss out on any future videos. It would also really help me towards my goal of reaching 50,000 subscribers this season. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next video where I'll be at a farmer's market hoping to make a profit. Bye!